So let's start talking about the most popular platforms in China. So, Jeremy, could you tell me about the most popular platforms in China?
Absolutely. So, can you hear me now? Great. So, thank you very much. So, living behind the Great Firewall in China gives rise to a very unique social media system, and while the rest of the world lives in the world of Instagram, Facebook, but in China, WeChat is the number one platform. No businesses can succeed in China without a presence on WeChat. Weibo is making a resurgence, very popular amongst younger audience, post 85, and we have now seen more younger consumers using TikTok, which is a short video platform, formerly Musical.ly, and also TikTok is also known as Douyin in Chinese, and Xiaohongshu Chinese, and English is called Red. And on travel specifically, we have Ma Fengguo, which is a user-generated content platform for travel, and we also have the Fliggy. Fliggy is actually founded by Alibaba, very similar to Ctrip.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Allow me to, can everyone hear me? Okay, allow me to talk you through the most popular social media platforms in Russia. Although the social media scenery is quite similar to the rest of the world, there is some particularity as well as the homegrown social media platforms. So the most popular one is VKontakte, the shorter version is vk.com, and it has around 40 million monthly users. It's appealing more to the younger audience, age 16 to 25. It is also quite often referred as Russian Facebook because of a very similar interface. It allows people to create their profiles, upload their pictures, engage with the content by commenting and liking. Apart from that, there is a special feature which is which the platform allows users to upload audio and video files, which generally means that people spend longer time on this platform. The second one is called Odnoklassniki. Shorter version would be OK.ru, which is another homegrown platform, and that engages around 20 million users on monthly basis. Originally, it was created to reconnect classmates and people who used to study together through over distances of time. However, with time, it serves a much broader purpose rather than just connecting former classmates. It also allows people to upload their pictures, create profiles. It generally appeals to a more mature audience, age 35 plus. However, the platform recently introduced the feature of online games, which is also more relevant to the younger audience. So Facebook is number 3. It has around 16 to 20 million users on a monthly basis. Most of the users use in the larger cities in the European part of Russia, and they have, majority of them have a higher education or university degree or university degrees, and shall we assume have larger income. Instagram is another widely spread platform. It has around 15 million users nowadays. The behavior of Russian users on Instagram is very similar to the rest of the world. People upload pictures of their families, of their travel destination. Also, they like to post a lot of pictures about themselves. Very importantly, one of the trending topics on Russian Instagram is health and beauty, and one of the most popular research query is advice on beauty and health and well-being and healthy eating. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell. Also, there is one more social media platform. It's still in the stage of its infancy, which is Telegram. As you might know, it's a platform similar to WhatsApp, However, there is a function of creating groups and communities, and therefore people can comment and post something on communities. So basically, it's a WhatsApp with a community feature. VK is mostly Russian market. However, Odnoklassniki, OK.ru, is very popular in CIS countries. And it's very important to know that 30% of its users coming from outside of Russia. So meaning that people that were born in Russia and then migrated to other countries or living in the former USSR countries. So like, let's say 70% live in Russia, 30% outside of Russia. And also Facebook, as well as I mentioned, mostly in European part of Russia, but also I forgot to mention that it was not available in Russian language until very recently, so therefore it was used by Russian people who were able to speak English. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I ask David the first question, remember the hashtag ATM Dubai and ideas arrive here. So if you want to tweet about what you're seeing or put it on social media, please use the hashtags. That's my hashtag there, my Twitter handle and Instagram handle on the corner. Any questions, I will respond as usual. So David, you've been waiting patiently. Expo 2020, 18 months away, very exciting time. You just started your first campaign. How do the Chinese and the Russian markets fit into the strategy for Expo 2020?
Yeah, the Chinese market and the Russian market are really important markets for just not Expo, but for the UAE in general. And outside of our 10 core key markets, when we did launch our most recent campaign, we had a lot of learnings entering the Chinese market and the Russian market. Aside from all the different platforms, just like Jeremy said, WeChat, the most prominent platform and probably the most important out of all of them, in addition to the media mix in China. When China came online for us, it was a massive eye-opener, and we were only touching probably a small percentage of the country, but it drove an enormous amount of traffic and showed some really, really amazing interest in Expo. And if we only had been able to turn it on earlier because of the complications. And what I mean by complications, for you that don't know, there's a lot of paperwork involved when getting online in China, and it's a little slower. So the approval processes take a little longer, and it's important that you kind of plan ahead and try to mitigate those risks when looking at. But once you're online, it's great, and it's important that when we go out, when we went out, we went in the Chinese spoken language. I think that's crucial and critical, and ensuring that your websites are translated in Chinese is also important. Now, the Russian market was a little different. Again, they're mutually, how can I say it, important, but the Russian market was a little easier to access. Again, VK was an important platform for us, and ensuring that we can actually communicate in the languages that are required. So community management, very important to be able to communicate in the speaking language, so Russian and in Chinese. One thing, part of our strategy is ensuring that we have an agency based in the countries that we're working in, China especially, and the other platforms no different. Like so, in Russia, Instagram, Facebook, very, very important platforms as well. And we were online there, and we've seen some amazing, learnings and insights into the different traffic that we're getting and exposure.
Absolutely, it's China. That has to be Chinese, and given the fact that 1.4 billion in China speak unified language, which is Mandarin.
Do you know if, it's the same question I asked the Greek one, do you know if the Chinese population, there's a huge population outside China, and especially where I come from Australia, do they follow these same social media channels as well?
Yes, I can say that yes, because there's a lot of overseas Chinese communities living in Australia or elsewhere, North America and Europe. They also use the Weibo as well as WeChat to communicate with friends and family back home. And they also, that's because the fact that China is behind the Great Firewall, so a lot of the information is only available on those platforms. So for international companies or even overseas Chinese communities who live abroad and want to understand what's happening in China, those are the platforms that they wanna get on.
And that's an important point to remember, that even though you're looking at platforms that are based in China, you will hit a lot of the expat population through Southeast Asia.
Exactly.
And it's the same principle as Twitter, Facebook, all America, and YouTube, if you look into it. So it's the same sort of principle. Does that apply for you as well, for the Russian market? Do you expect Russian speakers outside of Russia use the platforms? And do you prefer to use the platforms to attract these markets? Is it English or Russian? I think I already answered that. I still like to hear from you.
I think it generally depends on where people live. So if you're Russian living abroad, most probably you will use Facebook. If you are Russian living in Russia, then it's probably one of the homegrown platforms. Yeah.
Okay, very good. We were talking about the question I wanted to leave is what content works and why.
Yeah.
For students, I think we know, for those who've seen the sessions over the past few years here, know the importance of visuals, the importance, how important the photos and videos are. The first session we did 5 years ago, they here, the first time I spoke, it wasn't as important. It is now critical to have images and videos. So I'd be very interested to know how this applies in the two most popular markets coming into the US. Who's to start? Let's go.
Well, if you look at the evolution of social media in China as a whole, back in the mid 2000s, so it was very heavily based on text. So a lot of text, blogs. That's what we're looking at. But then, as Weibo arrived, you've seen more, because there's a fact that it's character. There's a limit on the number of characters you can post on Weibo. So it's 140 characters, but now they have changed that. So it's very Twitter-like in a sense. And then moving, fast forwarded to now, you see images, content such as GIF, moving images, as well as short videos, are increasingly popular in China, and more and more brands, especially hotel brands, are moving away from text-centric campaign and into the much shorter video platform, more shorter video content to appeal to the audience. We're looking at less than 10 seconds short, less than 10 seconds. So because it's
and when we actually launched our campaign just recently, this was a clear insight that anything more than 15 seconds in the Chinese market is too long, and they have a very, very short attention span. When I say the Chinese market has a very short attention span to consume content. They will leave very quickly if it's not engaging. If it's not interesting for them, they will actually go somewhere else, and you'll see some massive bounce rates, which is not untypical from that market. Yeah, of course.
Well, in a way, it's a very similar scenario. And speaking about attention span, there was a recent research by Microsoft that shows that nowadays the attention span of a human being is 8 seconds, which is 1 second shorter than a goldfish. So we only have 8 seconds to grab attention of our users, and that's why it's very, very logical why you should probably do it as short as possible. In terms of video and photo content, I have two great examples. One from TDCM. and the other one from one of the beverage producer in Russia. So what did DCM do? It was a series of short videos with celebrities, and it was called 5K Challenge. So basically, celebrities should have come to Dubai or to UAE and spend 3 days and spending 5,000 dirhams on accommodation, on entertainment, and posting it on their social media channels, which had a lot of traction and a lot of engagement, interaction with the source market. The other example is one of the beverage companies. What they've done was a series of sitcoms where also celebrities posted about how they can consume these beverages in their casual situation, or how fun it is, or how everyone can do it. So yeah, that was one of the success stories.
The attention span of a goldfish for us, there's the line of the day for you. It's amazing what you look. I'm just interested in the video. What type of video? What type of photo content? What are the style of photos specifically that works? There's different types of photos. We've heard that video for both Russia and China. Sure, it's better. But what is the photo content? What specifically is it? People, is it scenery? For the Russian money, I know because it's quite golden. That features and poetry do very well, don't they? So what is the sort of content that will attract? So do you think this works this way, or do you
Well, there is no one sort of formula to create viral content or appealing content for the Chinese market, because there's no one Chinese consumer. So if you look at China as a whole, there are so many provinces and regions. So each region has its own preferences. So it's definitely about understanding your target audience and creating the content that appeals to them. But from my experience, we have seen, particularly in first tier cities in China, I'm talking about Shanghai, Beijing, as well as Guangzhou and Shenzhen, we've seen an increase of clean and minimal style of photo shooting. So let's say if you're doing a photo shoot, people do photo shoot of scenery. People like the wider shots of the view and with 1 or 2 person in it. So as opposed to just scenery as a blank picture. Yeah. So.
a very traditional Chinese drawing? They feature this very style, these long paintings, and all you see is and then 2 little figures at the bottom.
Yes.
And that's very traditional you see. These are what Chinese are fascinating. And that method of having where people are spread apart of a very big picture, it seems to have come through into the social media as well.
In a sense, yes. Yes.
Okay.
I think, in my opinion, the user-generated content is the best performing one. And also, we should always look at the purpose of visit of travelers from Russia. And in UAE, we see it's approximately 90% of leisure travelers. And what do leisure travelers want? Probably sit by the beach, swim in the pool, enjoy facilities, and just enjoy the nice and warm weather of this country, especially when you have minus 10 degrees 9 months out of 12. So the content that showcases facilities, in case you work for a hotel, that works best. In case your destination, perhaps also sightseeing and facilities in terms of leisure for leisure travelers.
Okay, David, in the early days of the campaigns, you were looking at a lot of markets, but have you noticed any difference between Chinese, Russian, content and content you would normally share elsewhere, since you cover quite a few?
Yeah, we cover a few markets, but I mean those 2 in particular. One thing that we haven't talked about now, or up until now, is influencers or KOLs, key opinion leaders in those markets, and those are very critical in terms of engaging with the audiences and looking at the different KOLs in each market and how you can actually adapt your content and semi-brand it with those KOLs. And the reason why is they own the audience, they're engaged with that audience, and it's not the brand speaking to them, it's from within the actual market, and they actually would help the brand amplify that style of communication. So these are two, that's one area for both markets that we're exploring, and we'll probably start engaging with influencers or key opinion leaders in those markets.
Key opinion leaders in the Chinese market. Some of them have very big numbers, Jeremy. Could you add something here with key opinion leaders, if you would?
Well, we can talk hours about that because what key opinion leaders or KOLs in China is a huge market. So it's about working with them to localize the content. So a lot of times what we've seen from experience with many international brands is that they would think that whatever works on Instagram would automatically translate in the Chinese cultural context, but that's not always the case. So what we usually advise our clients is to adopt a global strategy, meaning finding the right balance between maintaining your brand DNA and understanding what content and what strategy that would tap into your core audience. And one way of doing that is to work with key opinion leaders who understands the market and who's able to help with creating content for the brand.
We're not really going too deeply into key opinion leaders. Is an excellent topic. But one thing that I've noticed in speaking to a lot of businesses is that when you are working with key opinion leaders, they've got to be a good fit for your brand. And a Ferry who was talking here last year, who was on the stage last year, he's in the front row, said exactly that same thing. When you were choosing for the hotel chain he worked at the time, he talked about the importance of finding the people that match your brand. It's a business partnership. It's not just that person's got a lot of numbers, they must be good. No, is it something that they fit your brand? Are they on your message? Do they understand where you're coming from? And Ferry is sitting here, Ferry Trinidad, nodding his head, because this is what he does in the hotel industry, and he addressed that last year. So I'm very glad you touched on that point. But it's not just picking people with the biggest numbers or just saying, oh, that person looks good. It is, you are looking at a business relationship, and you need to approach it as a business relationship. You agree?
Yeah. So this is what we're actually at Expo. Part of our strategy is an influencer talent, so to speak, Friends of Expo, if we like to call it. And it's more than just influencers. We're looking at ambassadors, we're looking at celebrities, but the influencer market specifically is a big part of our social strategy, given that the social platforms, YouTube, Weibo, WeChat, are massive platforms, and this is where they are producing the content, and this is where they're engaging with their audience. And exactly what Jeremy said, it's about localizing the content. It's about helping brands reach people you would probably never reach. The landscape last year versus this year is completely different. I mean, Huda Beauty didn't have 32 million followers last year. Now she's got 32 million, but you're right. Is she right for the brand? Maybe an area of the brand, but then you need to match your brand with certain key influencers or key opinion leaders.
Well, just to add to that, I don't think it's not just about the number of followers. I think it has got to be the right match, and more recently we're moving away from key opinion leaders and to local opinion leaders. By that we mean working with opinion leaders that not necessarily have millions of followers, but then they're able to help you tell the brand story. For example, if your brand is about design, art, or gardening, why don't you look into key leading architecture or a leading artist to collaborate, as opposed to using Instagram followers who have millions of followers but then have nothing to do with your brand at all. So those for me, those opinion leaders seem to be able to tell the brand story in a more effective way.
It's 2 years ago at the show, one of the brands I was meeting with here told me of the word micro-influencers, which is, what it means is someone with not a huge audience. It doesn't mean they have 100,000, they have a lot less, but their engagement is extremely good. And I want you to bear that in mind as I ask the next question about how do you create this, what I call meaningful engagement. And by meaningful engagement, it's not just a like. A like is not as good as a retweet, and it's not as good as a comment. And a comment on Instagram isn't a great photo. It's something that it's a thoughtful comment that provides some context. You can get bots that can leave comments with nice photo, great pic, nicely done. That is not engagement. That's robots. So meaningful engagement. So let's go through. Who wants to start? You want to start? Irina will start here about how do you create meaningful engagement on social media. Let's look at the Russian market first.
Well, in my opinion, we should also always look into having your brand ambassadors as your existing clients, and creating a meaningful engagement in that case would be creating a trusted brand. And what happens a lot in Russia is that people just don't trust brands they don't know. And if you had a meaningful engagement, if your customer had a pleasant experience, that's the first thing that you can do. Is you can engage with those people, you can comment in the native language, and you can make sure that those people will go to their friends and families and will recommend your brand. I think that's the most easiest exercise, and that will be your micro-influencers and micro-ambassadors of your brand.
It's interesting you mentioned the ambassadors or your advocates are effectively your friends of
Expo.
Friends of Expo. It's the same concept. It's those people, in sales, they say the 80-20 rule, 80% of your people, 20% of your people get 80% of your sales, and in a lot of ways, your advocates are those people. So do you want to comment on this about getting meaningful engagement or creating it within the Chinese market?
Right. I think to achieve meaningful engagement we do that by having a stand on something and humanize the brand. By that I mean, a lot of, yes, you have to interact with your followers on social media, respond to the comments, those give you engagement, meaningful conversation. But beyond that, I think consumers are interested in what makes your brand. And for us, we just did a social media campaign recently for one of our luxury hotel clients, and the campaign is about telling the story of the team members of the hotel. What we do is that we spotlight these team members and the connection with the brand and how they make the brand what it is today. And it was very successful because it's not celebrities who are telling their story. It's not influencers who are telling the story. It's the people that work there on a daily basis who have more insight than anyone else, and be able to tell that story.
Yeah, and I mean, look, for Expo 2020, when you don't actually have a physical presence yet, it's a struggle. It's a constant challenge for us to find ways to create engaging content when there's nothing to really show yet, and it won't be ready for another 18 months. And so we're trying to find really innovative ways. We're creating content from original content. We're looking at, and we're working with our participating countries with animation, with CGI, with renderings, and try to make it as engaging as possible or interesting in getting people to come back to follow us, to visit us, to react somehow with the content. And very soon we'll start releasing content over the next few months where it'll be a lot more engaging. You'll actually start to see physically what the expo is all about. Because it's, for some, this is what the expo is about. It's an exposition when it really isn't. It's more than a trade show. It's 60 days or 60 live shows a day. It's 192 different countries. So you can actually, you have a passport to visit different countries. There's foods from all around the world. It's open till 2 a.m. in the morning on the weekend. So it'll be something for everyone. It doesn't make a difference if they're young or old.
Entirely agree with you. Now, there was something that you raised, and you said a word, and we hadn't discussed this before, the importance of storytelling. Storytelling is very important. In the session we have tomorrow, we'll talk about perceptions, changing perceptions, and I guarantee you storytelling is going to come up in that session. But does anyone want to add here the importance of storytelling in attracting these markets if you don't have to? If you were storytelling?
I'm happy to answer.
Okay,
I'm
since
happy-
you mentioned that you want to brought it up.
I'm happy to answer that question because what we've seen many times with our clients when they try to enter the China market is that they duplicate exactly what works in the international market, and we. Can you hear me? Okay. Many times we've seen they misinterpret the Chinese consumers and to be too Chinese. But that I mean that could be in many senses, and they completely miss the mark. And I think being sorry.
In what ways can they miss the mark and be condescending?
Well-
Can you give me an example of an unintentional,
Right.
without
I'm sure-
mentioning a brand, or
Right.
just
I'm sure you have heard one of the luxury fashion brands last year did a horrible Chinese campaign and got backfired pretty spectacularly. Italian fashion brand, Dolce Gabbana. Have you heard of it?
So what
Yeah.
happened?
Big
What
fiasco.
happened?
Well, what they did was that they were doing a fashion show in China. Prior to that, they launched a social media campaign based on and a serious video. It was completely insensitive in many senses, mischaracterized the local consumers.
Okay,
Local
thank you.
culture.
Storytelling. Would you like to tell us how storytelling works in the Russian market?
Like I mentioned, it's more about destinational approach and to have your customers interested in the destination itself, because let's be frank, you won't be traveling from overseas to visit a restaurant or to try a dish in a restaurant unless you are maybe a 3-star Michelin restaurant. So it's very important to tell a story about your city, about your brand, showcase different features, and in a broader and apply a holistic approach as well. So don't be scared to put longer captions to show to tell a story about the destination. And also we should not forget that social media lies at the very top of sales funnel, and the primary purpose of social media is to create this aspirational sentiment and to make these people want to come to a destination rather than to make a hard sale.
David.
Yeah, and I mean, storytelling is important for every brand. And with the expo, as you have seen or have been served at some point, our Welcome the Future communication, you'll see this story evolve as we continue this journey to opening Expo 2020. And it's critical, it's important, and it helps consumers, potential visitors understand exactly what we're trying to launch.
And you'll know that what was the key?
Key opinion leaders?
Key opinion leaders, and some of these are very good at telling stories. Some of these are very good, and you can utilize key opinion leaders with very strong storytelling techniques. It could be video story, it could be photography, or it could be writing in this way as well. So I just want to ask another question about how does social media fit into a strategy? It's not a standalone. You can't just rely on social media to get your message out there. It takes a lot more than that. Who would here like to comment first about how social media fits in to the overall marketing strategy when trying to attract the Russian and the Chinese markets? Who would like to start with this? David,
I'll go.
you're looking keen.
Look, I mean, social today is no different than any other media. If it's not part of your strategy, you shouldn't be in marketing. That's 100%. It's no different than TV or outdoor. And given, like, when you're looking at a destination like the UAE and the feeder markets like China and Russia, it's the quickest and most relevant way to speak to your audience. The Chinese market it's well known that the Chinese market and the Russian market have predominantly grown here in the past year or 2 years. We're constantly seeing more tourism. It's super critical. And aside from those two markets, Germany's another big market. The UK is our big market. India is a big market as well. And the best and easiest and quickest way to communicate is through digital, given that outdoor and TV is very, very expensive. Look, the Chinese market in a social world is still an expensive market. And it's important that the leadership team has the confidence and the budgets to support the media plan. Because if it doesn't, it really won't work. And we're in a fortunate position where, you know, Expos is such a big such a big investment for the UAE, and it's no surprise that the UAE is supported by about 70 to 80% of tourists, regardless of the resident market, like the addressable market. So it's a really important area.
Marketing strategy, social media, how does that fit in when trying to get the Russian market to come to where you want them to be?
I completely agree with David that it should be an essential part of your marketing strategy. However, in a destination as Russia, some people can still perform a very old school behavior, and rather than booking through your channels directly, will go through third parties just because they have more trust in them. And having said that, I think it's important also to involve social media channels of the third parties, which will be travel agencies or DMCs, and to provide them with the relevant content and maybe even do some sort of campaigns with them with your branded content, just to be able to reach out to them in the source market.
Yeah, and so let me also mention, it's really important, and I'm sure all of you guys in this room know this, is identifying your KPIs from the start, because the markets are very different and vastly different, and it's important that you understand what your objectives are in those markets as part of your media strategy or your overall marketing strategy for that point.
Now, that could be a topic for next year, measuring ROI in social media. I think we need a half a day for that one. Did you want to, Jeremy, would you like to add something here?
It sounds kind of obvious to say this, but China is the largest social media market in the world with more than 900 million active users. And there is no one China market, so you have different tiers of, but there are different regional markets. So when you just think of China as a continent, that's what I would usually advise my clients, is that yes, you would have your strategy for the first tier cities, but then once you go into the provincial cities, you have your strategy must adapt and change to the audience. And the one way for you to do that is to gather really good insights on what those audiences want to hear and want to understand, and then appeal to them accordingly. But in terms of travel and destination, you know, tier 1 cities are moving away from the group travel package tour already, and they're looking into visiting much further and far-flung destinations, and they are leading that. They are leading that right now in China. So recently we did a research, and we actually did a report, and amongst 400 affluent Chinese families, and we found that sustainability and organic food, as well as the health and fitness and wellness facility, are top considerations factor for them when they choose a destinations and a hotel. So, but then other cities in China are not quite there yet. So that's why I said, there must be multi-layered strategy when it comes to China.
So you'd love to hear that sustainability for Expo 2020 for Chinese. That's one of your themes. But sustainability, you talk about organic. Are there any other themes that work through? You gave us 2 examples there. Is there anything else that appeals to a different section? You mentioned your major cities, your provincial areas. Can you give me a little bit details? We're talking about a huge market. I mean, more than 1 billion people. That's just in China, let alone Chinese diaspora everywhere else. Can you give us a little bit more guidance on that? Because I know that China's a particular interest to people in this room.
So, in addition to what I just said earlier, Chinese travelers are increasingly traveling as family. So children, because of the one-child policy, so you have the inverted pyramid. So you have one child with parents and 4 grandparents and great-grandparents. So those we call them little emperors. They have some say in what a family chooses to experience and where to go. So when it comes to, it's also because of the fact that recently you have here so much so much news on pollution, food scare, and things like that. So healthy, sustainably sourced food, as well as facilities that provide great experiences for children, are definitely something that you would want to consider when it comes to appealing to the Chinese consumers, especially the top tier.
Thank you very much. Final question for the panel, then we'll open up to the audience. You probably already covered it, so just maybe briefly, we're talking about strategy, and not just a campaign strategy, and not just stories. Is there a strategy within your post? Is there a linear? This applies to you more than anyone, because you have a very definite timeline coming up to 18 months. So I might start with you, David. The strategy in how you market something on social media, or how the campaign on social media on its own, how that progresses. Do you want to start with that?
Yeah, so I mean, with our global campaign that we just recently launched, it was using social as an opportunity to amplify it and extend the campaign further in the different markets. Now, what's really important is to understand the markets themselves, because the markets, for example, maybe in the UK, they're predominantly booking online, where in the Russian market, in the Chinese market, they do a lot of research online, and Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of them book through tour operators, and they come in on large tours. So it's not like they're going to go to my website and book a ticket to the expo. They're going to come to my website, understand what what their fear of missing out will be on, and they'll probably go back to the tour operator, and that's a really important part of our strategy as well as a brand or as an experience in Dubai, is working with tour operators in those feeder markets. And if we don't do that, someone's not going to ask about us. So in terms of strategy, it's about driving awareness and reach at this point of the stage, this far out, and trying to sustain that as we try to start to build that consideration phase, and then eventually selling tickets. Now, someone told me that was quite familiar with the Chinese market was, look, Dave, and the Russian market as well. Look, Dave, it's great that you guys have a Chinese translation of your website or a Russian translation of your website. However, those markets are more comfortable with communicating and booking or doing things within sites within their own markets. And one of the key insights that we learned is the speed of our website loading coming from China or coming from Russia is much slower than someone coming from the UK, and that's probably because of certain firewall, deep packets, whatever they do for security reasons. So it's probably easier for us just to say, hey, this is Expo, now go to this other website in China and book through there if you're going to really book. And this is about us partnering with tour operators. Jeremy's smiling. Am I right? Am I on something?
I just want something to say, in China, social media is not just about generating content, it's about generating sales. Because social media is a 360-degree user journey from the moment you have your from the moment you have your brand available to the consumer, to allowing the consumer to purchase. And then WeChat is a platform. It's a platform that enables you to do that. You know, you have seen so many. We have seen many hotel brands, luxury or non-luxury. They use WeChat as a generation content kind of platform. At the same time, you are able to book, and you're able to book your hotels on WeChat. At the same time, CRM as well as other functionalities are also available in WeChat as well. So it's your sort of one-stop shop kind of platform essentially.
We could talk about this topic all day, but we only have an hour, so we're going to take some questions from the audience. So there's a microphone.
My name is Philippa Nichols. I work for Translations.com. We're actually the world's largest language services provider, so we help brands make multilingual content in different ways. And I think to your last point there, Jeremy and David, as WeChat is a platform that has a lot of different parts to it. It has booking, it has branding, it has social. Would you prioritize a WeChat platform over a Chinese language website, particularly as David, you said, it's quite an expensive market to get into?
Yes.
The question was, just in case you didn't hear, it's would you prioritize WeChat over a language site? That was a Chinese language site. So just in case you didn't hear, so yeah, please answer that.
My answer is yes. It is because not sure where you are hosting your websites from. For example, if you're hosting your websites in the UK or the US, Chinese consumers will have a very difficult time accessing them. And by providing a seamless experience for them to browse, to book, and to also leave comments and also allowing you to do CRM functionalities. So I would say WeChat is your to-go platform.
My name is Safot Suleiman. I'm a co-founder of OTA Triple V. We've recently launched. For an OTA to succeed in the Chinese market, given the difficulties of that market and the complexity, is it important or is it possible to incorporate in China? Is it important to incorporate in China to succeed and to pull Chinese consumers into your OTA business? Is it important for an OTA to incorporate in China, register as a business?
Is it important for an OTA to incorporate their business within China for the purposes of establishing?
Just to understand your question. So what are you a OTA based out of China or
yes,
elsewhere?
It is based out of China.
Yeah.
And if I was using WeChat as a platform to attract customers,
yes.
Is it important that an OTA be registered in China as well as a business?
Yes, of course. No, you can't do business in China without having a proper business license. So that's something that I would strongly advise you to look into.
All right. So I'm James. I manage the digital marketing of one of the luxury hotels in Dubai. I have two questions, if I may. One for Arina and one for you, Jeremy. Now, you mentioned one thing about Facebook in Russia, that it had approximately 20 million users, and at that time it was only in English. Now, my question is, for a traveler, does that indicate that Russians consume a lot of English content on social media, or is it necessary? I mean, generally it's normal to advertise in their local language, but seeing that you have 20 million users active on social media every month consuming content in English, is it all right to assume that as a marketer, you can also push content in English and actually see a good amount of success?
Well, it's always better to localize your content, and although you might be advertising in Facebook, it's always better to do it in Russian language. And although Facebook was, until 2016, was only available in English, it was obviously consumed in English, but then it started to be consumed in English and in Russian. But if you have a possibility to localize the content, it's always better to do so. Yeah, although they might be understanding English, but it's just you apply the cultural element and you get a better reach to your potential clients if you have this possibility.
Thank you. And Jeremy, just one last question for you. Talking about social media in China being one of the biggest communication platform. Now, when you look at other markets such as in Europe and the Americas, users or rather travelers heavily rely on online reviews. Do you see the same trend in China where travelers rely a lot on reviews when they're looking for a place to travel, or is it just the traditional way of doing their own research?
Yes, I think more and more travelers now are using social media as a platform to find inspiration. If you recall, I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the session, I mentioned Ma Fengwo. Ma Fengwo is actually the sort of TripAdvisor in China. So it's a user-generated content platform where people share their travel tips, travel guides with other people, and you're able to find, if I could just upload my full itinerary on that platform, and you would have access to that, and find whatever that might be available, might be suitable for you to plan your travel. So yes, definitely, because the fact that Instagram is not available in China, so WeChat, Ma Fengwo, and Weibo as well are the to-go platforms for travel inspirations.
The reason I was asking this is because obviously there's a lot of content that's generated by users on social media in China,
Yes.
which is often more than what you see brands doing. But speaking of actual reviews on social media, does that happen very often?
Can you repeat the last part, the second part?
Reviews on social media, does
Reviews,
it happen
yes.
often?
Yes,
as opposed
definitely.
to
Yes.
review websites?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. David wasn't asked a question at all, so he's going to have the final word because he wants to ask a question of you. Could you please ask your question?
Yeah, I just want to see a show of hands of all the people sitting here who are actually doing any type of marketing in China or Russia. Oh, that's pretty decent. And how many of you want to start doing? All right. So you guys all agree that these are important markets for your business in terms of, and out of all of them, how many found it very difficult to set up shop in those countries?
Hands up if you found it difficult to set up shop in China and Russia.
In terms of registering and getting
registering.
the business up and running? No? It was only me, huh?
Oh, no, there's a few. There's a few
Okay.
gently raised hands here.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, that's the end of the session. Just letting you know that we have, there's an Arabia-China Tourism Forum at 3:30. That's in about 15 minutes in the global stage. Tomorrow we are on again here. We are on at 1:30. At 1:30, talking about perceptions, and this will include the Jordan Tourism Board, who will talk about changing perceptions through social media. This is, if you want to contact me, that's where you can find me. I'm happy to answer any questions. And as usual, the reason these sessions are so good is because we have amazingly talented panelists who give their time to educate and share their immense knowledge. So we have Jeremy, Irina, and a special thanks to David because him and his team have an amazing job in 18 months changing the face of Dubai forever with Expo 2020. Please give them a round of applause.